Welcome back to American Catechism for episode number 60 and a special space race edition celebrating the Artemis 2 moonshot. Coming to you from Fort Worth, Texas on Saturday, April 11th, 2026, where it is currently 80 degrees. Yesterday marked the conclusion of the Artemis 2 spaceflight, where the NASA flight checked out the rocket and systems on the furthest flight from Earth ever, beating the Apollo 13 record and getting a great view of the dark side of the moon. This Artemis program is designed to get America back in space, back on the moon, with a goal of building a permanent moon base that will then help us get to Mars. A worthy goal. To help celebrate this Artemis 2 success, I'll be drinking some Australian whiskeys simply because of their name. So, Starward single malt and Starward 100 proof single malt. This one's called Nova, and this one's just 100 proof. I don't know why this one didn't have a name. I don't know. But these are from Australia, and the name caught my attention several years ago and seems to go with our space program. Why not? I'll be discussing my recollections of the early NASA spaceflight programs from my childhood in the 1960s and 70s, as well as taking a look at the current Artemis program. But first, the whiskey facts. These two single malt whiskeys weigh in at 82 proof and 100 proof. The 82 proof Nova is aged for 2 years in red wine barrels, and the 100 proof is aged for 3 years in red wine barrels. The Starward Nova is about $45, and the 100 proof 3-year is $56. Tasting notes. The Nova is very balanced with the malt and the wine influence. It's sweet, it's malty, it's fruity, berries, some spices, a little bit of wood. This is really quite good, very impressive for an 82 proof whiskey. 22 out of 25 was my score for this one, for taste. The 100 proof, though, this one's a little bit more rich and more intense in flavors in some ways, but it's not a dramatic taste improvement. In fact, I think the proof kind of overwhelms the wine flavor, it seems. So I gave it a 22 out of 25 for tasting as well. But there's a caution there with how powerful this one is. Scores, both of these whiskeys got an 87, but for different points for different things. Letter grade, Nova got a solid A. The 100 proof got an A minus. In other words, sipping neat, I prefer the Nova. But the 100 proof is more flexible. But it is hot. It drinks hotter than that 100 proof. So my recommendation, the Nova wins again on the flavor wise. But if you want flexibility, go with the 100 proof. Because the Nova got lost in a cocktail. I'm just not sure it's strong enough for a cocktail. The climate of Melbourne, Australia treats whiskeys much like here in Texas. So these are not going to be for everybody, I'll tell you that. Artemis facts. Let's go to the Artemis program. In ancient Greek mythology, Artemis is the daughter of Zeus and Leto, the twin sister of Apollo. Okay, there's your clue as to why NASA went with the name Artemis. She was an archer, the goddess of hunting in the wilderness, the wild animals, but also the goddess of childbirth, child care, and chastity. Imagine that, a Greek god of chastity. Hunters and midwives both prayed to Artemis. In NASA, the Artemis program is the long-awaited sequel to the Apollo program and is designed to take the U.S. back to the moon. The Artemis program uses the SLS rocket, Space Launch System. What a fancy name. When the Apollo program used the Saturn rocket system, as pictured here on this tie, Artemis 1 was unmanned, launched in November of 2022. It orbited the moon. Artemis 3 is scheduled for mid-2027 and will orbit the Earth to practice docking procedures with SpaceX and Blue Origin. So that's interesting. I like that idea. The Artemis flights are launched using, again, the SLS system, but that's made by the Boeing company. And you've got two stages. It's a super heavy lift systems, two stages, but there's also these two solid rocket boosters from Northrop Grumman on the sides, much like the space shuttle used. Its height is 322 feet and over 27 feet wide. The Orion capsule on top carries 4 astronauts, while Apollo only carried 3, and the Orion is much roomier if you watched any of the videos. So this is truly a massive rocket ship. Compared with the SpaceX Starship, though, Starship is much bigger at 394 feet tall, and it can launch 100 tons to low Earth orbit, while the SLS launches 95 tons to low Earth orbit. And the SLS can go directly to the moon, but Starship apparently is going to need to refuel en route. Starship can be reused, though, and is therefore much less expensive than the SLS, which is a single-use spacecraft. And we've all watched the Starship stuff as it comes back to Earth and it spreads those landing legs and lands, and that's pretty cool. So that helps make the system cheaper, more inexpensive. You can reuse it. Now, my memories of early spaceflight. I was born in the late 50s at the dawn of the manned spaceflight era, and I grew up watching the early Mercury program flights. And we have a Mercury astronaut visiting us right there. His name is Joe, G.I. Joe. Now, my dad liked aviation. He had taken an aviation course in high school in Texas, and he also liked science fiction. So he always wanted to watch the launches of the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo program. And so we kind of, as a family, would get up early and watch those launches. And I really feel sorry for those today who cannot accept the fact that my dad's World War II generation landed on the moon. Conspiracy theories can lead you astray into being science and history deniers. I remember being with my family on long drives at night, and my dad taught me how to look for satellites. And so we would look through the glass of the car as we drove at night and be looking for satellites. And I would spot one, and my dad would look, and there it was. Or he'd spot one, and he'd point it out to me. The feeling of being proud of my country was a huge part of that age of space flight. Inevitably, with the conclusion of the Apollo program and the beginning of Skylab in the mid-70s, and then the space shuttle in the 80s, spaceflight kind of became routine, and we stopped following it as closely. Spaceflight, like aviation in general, is extremely risky and dangerous. I remember the Apollo 1 disaster in January of 67, the trauma and the heroics of Apollo 13 in 1970, and the Space Shuttle's Challenger in 1986 and Columbia in 2003 that had the fatal accidents. So in aviation history, there have been hundreds of disasters, with many thousands killed through the years. And before that was the age of sailing. How many mariners have been lost at sea? And when you read the stories of Columbus or Magellan or the other great explorers during the age of sail, so many ships just didn't come back home. So many crew lost. Just because things are dangerous does not mean there's no value in attempting them. Spaceflight is now in our blood, and it is indeed the final frontier that we must expand into and conquer, and America must lead the way. During the 60s, when the Gemini and then the Apollo program were going, we were engaged in war in Vietnam. And now with Artemis, here we are engaged in a war in Iran. And we've gone around the moon. And then it's interesting to compare America's values with the Muslims that we're fighting, in that we have a woman as part of the crew of Artemis who just flew around the moon. One of the helicopter pilots that picked up the space flight crew after they landed in the ocean, one of the pilots of the Navy helicopter was a woman. And so, that shows our values in a way to the whole rest of the world. All right, let's go to the whiskeys. We're going to start here with what I'm going to do is all the categories. I'm going to start with the Nova and then go to the 100 proof. So we will cover the same territory that I usually cover. So history. This whiskey company was begun by David Vital, or Vitale. Vital is what I'm thinking, in Melbourne, Australia, 2007, 2008. I've seen two different dates for that. However, in 2015, Diageo invested in or purchased the company. I'm not sure who owns what now, but Diageo was involved. So their distillery was also known as New World Distillery, I think. And they've won more gold medals than any other Australian distillery, it seems. And that's what this little fiddly bit there is. So for history of both these whiskeys, 4 out of 5. Couldn't really get much more information. Bottle, label, and marketing. This Nova bottle, it's round, smaller at the base than the shoulders. The shoulders are rounded. But if you look at the 100 proof, again, it's a little bit smaller at the base, flares up, but it's got a kind of a steeper ascent here on the shoulders. It's not well rounded. It's more angled. And then when you look at, they're both clear glass, by the way. The Nova bottle is slightly taller. I don't know if you can tell that, but it is slightly taller. The label on the Nova, you've got a small label here, but a lot of artwork of stars, like a star chart, is etched into the glass there or applied onto the glass. And it feels etched. I don't know. But that's pretty cool. I really like that etching on the glass there. The 100 proof version still has a very cool label, although it's much more, it's larger, but I like the purple and the black and the gold. I think the color scheme there is good, and it still looks like, what are they doing there, going into some type of a warp speed or something. I don't know what they're doing there, but it's, I like the labels on both, and they're very different, and even the bottles have a slight difference. So I'm going to say for both bottles, it's a 5 out of 5 for bottle, label, and marketing. The website is pretty good, and there are several reviews of these whiskeys out there. So I've not seen any advertisements necessarily, but there's plenty of stuff online about them both. Appearance of these whiskeys. Nova has a nice bronze color, and that's a 3. The 100 proof is a little bit darker, so that's going to be a light 4. That's dark enough to be a 4, I think. So that's the 100 proof there that's darker. So that's one of the differences. Composition. They source all their ingredients from within a day's drive of Melbourne. Melbourne's got a climate that's very similar to Texas, with a lot of hot, dry summers and cold winters, and some ups and downs there. So, there's some drama with their climate, and that shows up in the whiskey, I guarantee you. There's some similarities here with Texas whiskeys. Very, very dramatic, okay? So these whiskeys are a little bit unique in that they age their whiskey totally in wine casks the entire time. So these are not finished in wine casks. They are totally aged in red wine casks. And one thing I read said the barrels are steamed, not charred in some cases. I don't know what that does. That's the first time I've ever encountered that, so I'm not sure about that. These are single malts, pot still distilled. And the 100 proof did mention that they use charred American oak in the red wine and then in the whiskey. So there is some charring going on there. So there's a little bit of confusion or difference between these two, but kind of hard to nail down the details. But all in all, a lot of clarity there. I like the fact that they use a resource that's close to Melbourne for everything, other than the American oak barrels. So 14 out of 15 for composition. Let's nose these whiskeys now. I'll start with the Nova. It's a very pleasant nose. You get some single malt notes there, but you also get that wine influence. So it is sweet, malty, fruity, raspberry, strawberry, that red wine in there, touch of wood. 8 out of 10 on the nose for the Nova. The 100 proof, it's a little bit stronger than the 82 proof. And I kind of think that it tamps down on the wine influence on the nose just a little bit. It's still a pleasant nose. You can tell it is stronger. So 8 out of 10 for both of these. Let's go in for the taste, and we'll start with the 82 proof Nova. And that is really delicious. Sipping neat. It's very balanced between the malt and the wine influence. Sweet, malty, fruity. Again, you get the red berries, whether it's raspberries or strawberries, something like that. Spicy. This is really quite good, very impressive. So 22 out of 100, or 22 out of 25 for that 82 proof Nova. Moving on now to the 100 proof. A little bit more rich, more intense. This is not a dramatic taste improvement. In fact, in some ways, you lose a little bit of the red wine, of the berries. The proof kind of overshadows that a little bit. Still very good. So I'm going to say both of these are 22 out of 25. Mouthfeel, burn, and finish. The 82 proof Nova is not thin, has a medium mouthfeel, but again, the burn is slightly hotter than 82 proof would indicate, but it's pleasant. Okay, it's more than just mouth tingles. It is a burn, and it's focused in the mouth. So if you're proof sensitive, if you don't like the burn, this one may be stretching your boundaries a little bit. It's focused in the mouth and the back palate and the finish, though. The berry notes in the malt do linger for a while for a medium finish. And again, the burn is light. There's nothing dramatic here, but there's more than most 82 proofs you're going to have. So I'm going to say mouthfeel, burn, and finish for the 82 proof is 13 out of 15. On this 100 proof, though, three-year-old, it does gain a little bit in the mouthfeel, but that burn is pretty strong. I mean, this hits above its weight. It really does. I like a good burn in a whiskey, so it doesn't bother me. But I do think in this case, the proof hides some of the flavors. It gains in mouthfeel and a strong burn, which I enjoy. That extra burn, the intensity, obscures some of the flavors. So for drinking neat, I really think that 82 proof is a better neat pour than this one. So I'm going to knock it down a point. So this is a 12 out of 15, whereas the 82 proof was a 13 out of 15. Flexibility and versatility. The Nova Neat is great. It's got enough flavor and burn. If you put it on ice, I guess it would be okay. It's got enough burn there, enough flavors there. However, I did try this in a cocktail. I've tried it in a couple of cocktails. And we did an old fashioned with this one, and it just seemed to get lost in there. Now, I had my neighbors over, and we did Rusty Nails, which is Drambuie mixed with this. And it was pretty good, although, again, I felt that it really lost the red wine influence with that Drambuie in there. And I don't put a lot of Drambuie when I make a Rusty Nail. I mean, it's just a little bit. Okay, so I just don't think this one holds up well to a cocktail. However, when I made a cocktail with the 100 proof, it did better. I did make an old fashioned with this, and the old fashioned was pretty good. But again, the red wine aspect of it seems to disappear. Now, granted, in the old fashioned, I had some orange bitters, I had some orange peel, and that citrus kind of took over. But the 100 proof version, I think, is a better mixer. But again, you're looking at, $56. So if you want to mix that level of whiskey, that's fine. I tend to start getting nervous at the $40 mark as far as mixing goes. So, I don't know. Let me pause here and make a cocktail with this 100 proof, and we'll be right back. And I'm back. I've made another old fashioned. They're different from the one I made the other day. The old fashioned I used the other day, again with this 100 proof version, is I used some Angostura bitters and some orange bitters, a sugar cube, turbinado sugar cube, orange peel, and a cherry. This time around, I left the orange bitters out. I used the Angostura, and then I used some black walnut bitters, because I really felt that the presence of all that citrus took away from the red wine. So there's not even any orange peel in here. I do have a cherry right there, and I still used the turbinado sugar cube. So we'll see how this works. And in honor of the U.S. Navy and everything they did for the Artemis flight, cheers. And this one is much better than the one yesterday or the other day. Not using the citrus in here, the orange, that helps. The walnut bitters goes very well with this. So, very definitely, this is the better old fashioned. Still, the red wine influence kind of disappears. So if you really want the full red wine influence, I would go with the Nova, the 82 proof, because this 100 proof version is just plain hot. And I don't mind high proof whiskeys. I drink several that are in the 100 to 120 range. But with this one, it took away instead of adding to. There you go. So for flexibility, versatility, I'm going to say the Nova gets a 4 because it doesn't, you lose too much when you mix it. The 100 proof, though, it maintains a lot of good characteristics, even though you kind of lose the red wine influence. So that's a 5. Price, value, and availability. The Nova here locally for me in Fort Worth, Goody Goody had it for $44.99, and Specs did not have it. Total Wine had it for $44.99. The 100 proof Goody Goody had it for $55.99. Total Wine for $56.99, and Specs did not have it. Specs does have the twofold Starward, 2 grain. So for price, value, and availability, though, I'm going to say 9 out of 10 for both of these whiskeys. Bonus points, I think the Nova is going to be my favorite of these two, so I want to say 5 bonus points for Nova. The 100 proof, and I would consider buying Nova again. The 100 proof, likely not, and so only a 4 for bonus points for the 100 proof. Giving me a total score of 87 for both whiskeys, but for different things. And for drinkability, the letter grade, Nova gets a solid A. The 100 proof, an A-. All right, so my analysis and recommendation. I highly recommend the Nova. That 100 proof just drinks hot, and it's a bit harsh. I think it loses the red wine influence, but it's pretty cool to have Australian whiskeys. They offer lots of flavor. I think the climate is very similar to Texas, and you can sense that when you drink these. And again, the 100 proof is more versatile, but it's also more expensive. So, if you want to spend that much money for a cocktail whiskey, that's fine. All right, well, that does it for this episode, and we're going to keep track of Artemis. Next year, the Artemis 3. And then I know that SpaceX has got several launches planned as well. So we'll try to keep track of that. And we've got our Mercury astronaut here who will join us next time. For now, this is American Catechism out here.